So you've got your first transaction. One of the questions that comes up is, should I use a transaction coordinator? What is a transaction coordinator and what do they do? So a transaction coordinator is someone who helps you with the paperwork associated with a real estate transaction. This can be really useful, can be a big time saver for you. There's typically a fee associated with this that they will charge. It's usually paid at the close of escrow. And this can be a wide range of things, from when you're taking a listing, maybe they're helping get some items signed by your clients, maybe they're prepping certain items that you're going to send out, maybe you're getting documents back from the other side of a transaction, and that TC is gathering those, confirming that they're signed and initialed and completed, uploading them to your company's transaction management system, and making sure it meets all the requirements for your company. That's just a brief overview of what they do. That would also include getting documents from the escrow and title company, potentially getting documents from the lender and or sending documents to the lender. It just really depends, but it's fairly broad in the sense of they're helping support you as an agent with a lot of the paperwork burden that you have to complete. Being kind of vague here on purpose, because one of the important lessons in all of this is it's really important that if you are talking to a transaction coordinator, to make sure you understand what they intend to do, because it is not the same. And this is why some agents may prefer this transaction coordinator and other agents may prefer this other transaction coordinator, partly because of the work they're willing to do, and secondly, the way they do that work. One key thing you need to know about your transaction coordinator is, are they licensed or not? So if they're licensed, then are they licensed with your company? So if they're not licensed and at your company, that means they cannot do any licensed work on this transaction. You'll make sure from a compliance standpoint that they aren't doing anything that would constitute negotiations. So they can maybe prepare some items for you to send to another party, but they cannot write things and negotiate on your behalf or on the client's behalf. That'd be considered negotiating, and that would be a licensed activity, which they are not set up to do. 90+% of transaction coordinators, if they are licensed, are not actively licensed with the company that they're working for. So just, it's something to be aware of. More likely than not, the transaction coordinator you're talking about is not to do licensed activities. So just keep in mind on that. If you've recently done your real estate classes, you'll know they're really strict about what constitutes licensed activity and what doesn't. So, watch out for that. A few things to think about as you're using this TC. First off, I really recommend TCs. I think it's really hard to overstate the value that a TC brings, mostly because the real value they bring is you. They bring more time back to you. You can use that time to do things that are more business generation related, more developing rapport and relationships with your clients, working on your marketing, following up with clients that have expressed interest, all the things that actually bring business through the door for you rather than maintaining the business. Secondly, though, you have to remember that although the TC is a great tool, a great resource to support you, ultimately anything they do, including any mistakes they make, are as if you made those mistakes. So you as the licensed professional are still responsible for any of the paperwork and the way anything is handled. I think that's just something you always have to keep in mind working with a TC, that you've brought them in a transaction. Yes, they may have a great deal of skill. Potentially they're vastly more experienced than you. Nonetheless, it's your license. You're the licensed professional who's responsible for their activity in the transaction. So keep that in mind. Also, I always recommend at least interview, if not work with, more than one transaction coordinator. This is for a handful of reasons. Sometimes TCs have agents that just get really busy all at one time, and if your TC doesn't have the bandwidth to keep up with more volume, you can tend to see the quality of their work decline, which reflects directly on you. So it's nice to have someone else that you have some rapport with, that this is my preferred TC, but I have a backup in case my preferred person just gets too busy or needs to take time off and I need to send a few files to someone else. It's just good to be able to do that. Also, sometimes until you've worked with more than one TC, you don't actually know that this TC does these 5 things for you, but this other TC does the first 4 of those 5, not the 5th thing, but they also do 6, 7, and 8 on your behalf. And maybe that's actually more important to you than the 5 things that this other person does. They don't all have necessarily the exact same scope of work. Talking to a few different people, you may find someone who you like the work they do as well as you like the way they do that work and the way they communicate. It'll just help you have some redundancy, some backup in your business when you need it. Another item to make sure you're doing with your transaction coordinators is communicate early and often. So if you have a transaction coordinator, so you've written the offer, you've gotten it accepted, don't wait 2 or 3 days to send that to your transaction coordinator. You want it to them immediately so they can start doing whatever set of tasks that they're going to do for you. The standard for transaction coordinators is that they're typically asking the agent on the other side for documents that your office requires, as well as getting a lot of the documents that your office requires into the transaction management system. Our office uses SkySlope. There's a handful of others that are available. This is, essentially where your company's checklist of required documents live. So if you have a particular type of transaction, your company's going to say, for that type of transaction, we want this list of documents to be completed, initialed, signed, and uploaded to this checklist. And that paperwork is what your transaction coordinator is helping with. So they're possibly helping you get some of that filled out. They're possibly helping you send some of that out for electronic signature. When it comes back, if there's anything missed, they're checking for any missed signatures, initials, information, and they're checking that before they're putting it into that transaction management system. In addition, when the company, the brokerage, has reviewed the things that are put in, if there are either errors or things that are kicked back saying, thanks for sending this document, but you missed this other thing, or actually it's the wrong document for this circumstance, then the TC should then help you get that corrected. It's a fairly broad range of responsibilities. Some of what that includes would be handling communication with the escrow company, in some cases with the lender or loan officer that's handling the loan if that's at play in this transaction. But again, I'm using some broad language here because not all TCs will handle communication in all of those parts. You want to make sure that you have some sense of where they land on that. Usually what I suggest to an agent who has not yet worked with a TC in their career, either because they're new or they've just always done it themselves in the past, is try more than one transaction coordinator. So you can do one file with one person and another with another. One of the advantages of that is you will get a sense for how different maybe they are, and how maybe someone communicates in a way that you're more comfortable with, maybe the way more similar to how you communicate with your clients and others in a transaction. So that sense of consistency, that overall experience maybe is more similar, and that can be a nice feeling for the people that you're working with. When you're working with a TC, one thing you have to remember, whether they're licensed or not, any error a TC makes is your error. So you, as the licensed real estate professional, are the one who is ultimately responsible for all of the work that TC does. A lot of experienced agents that don't use TCs, this is the hurdle they have the hardest time with, is just letting go of that responsibility. And so there are real advantages to being able to delegate some of that work. So you can spend your time on other things that are maybe more beneficial to the growth and maintenance of your business. However, if you are delegating that work, you ultimately are still responsible for all of the work that TC does. And so if they miss a signature, your company may ask you for that signature. There's a document that was negotiated and they don't send that to the other party, and the escrow closes and your client doesn't get the money that you negotiated for, that's going to be on you, not on the TC. That is sometimes an extremely painful lesson. You just really want to A, have a TC that you trust, but B, even though you trust them, you still want to make sure that things are done and you're monitoring that work. In particular, for newly licensed agents, while you can use a TC on your very first transaction, I really recommend for new agents to do as much as they can, if not the entire transaction, without a TC. You will learn the transaction better, you'll learn the systems better, it'll prompt you to ask questions and think about things that you just won't have awareness of if someone else is handling that for you in your first transaction. Is another school of thought that as a agent on your first transaction, you should 100% use a TC, because they will know things that you don't know and take care of things and just be more efficient for you. Can go that route. I just would really remind everyone that you're still going to be responsible for the work that they do. And so if you're responsible for someone's work that they're doing, you don't actually understand what they're doing, that can put you in a precarious situation. One way or another, you really need to understand the things that a TC is doing on your behalf. Part of what goes with that is I've seen a trend in recent years where sometimes agents treat their transaction coordinators almost like supervisors. Like, I don't know how to do that. I'm gonna get all of my advice about the real estate business from my TC. And the TC does see more transactions than agents generally. However, in the same way we said, you're responsible for what the TC does, the TC is not your broker or your manager, right? So your TC is someone that's assisting you, but ultimately it's your broker, it's your manager that are setting the policies and which documents are required, how amendments should be filled out and handled. All of that is really not appropriate to be delegated to your TC. It should be your process, your company's process that the TC is adhering to, not you adhering to the TC's process. So just, I think understanding that is important. So hopefully that gives you some thoughts about what a transaction coordinator can do and how you might work with them and how they can help you in your business. I will say that I fall strongly in the camp of most productive agents I feel should be using a transaction coordinator. I think a good TC can be an absolute lifesaver in your transaction and in your business in general. It does free you up to handle more of that communication with your clients who in a lot of cases want to work with you more than they want to work with your TC. In the same way, your TC can be a good part of your team, your business, your plan. However, there are more, typically more valuable ways you can spend your time than dealing with just some of the necessities associated with the paperwork in a real estate transaction. You have to get it right. Ultimately, you're the one conducting it and making sure that it's done right, but you have other things you need to be doing, like generating business, like cultivating relationships, like working on your marketing, and all of the things that we have talked about along those lines as well. Those things are what keep you in the business. The TC hopefully is helping keeping you out of trouble, but if you're not generating business, it doesn't matter if you have a TC or not, right? You need to be doing the things that generate business and drive that business to yourself. A TC, while not doing that directly for you, frees up your time so that you can do that for yourself and build your own business in that way. Hopefully that helps. Let us know if you have questions. Keep an eye out for our next bit of information. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful. If you learned something or if this helped you solve a problem, follow me for more.